All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our next session. We have Seth Craig, our EMS program head at Rappahannock Community College, who will be presenting on helping a stranger, the EMS topic. Take it away, Seth.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I appreciate you all joining me. As they said, my name is Seth Craig, and I'm currently the program head of EMS programs at Rappahannock Community College. In my life, I've always wanted to kind of make a difference, be a positive difference in people's lives. But I've finally landed in EMS, but I've taken a really kind of crooked road, you might say, but that's okay. And I think that shows, there are a lot of different ways to get to where you want to go. I've got a bachelor's of science in biology, secondary degree in education. I actually got my master's degree in forensic toxicology, and then I got my paramedic through Rappahannock Community College. But I've always had a love for science, and because of that, I started off as a teacher. I've taught everything from high school biology to environmental science to anatomy and physiology, wilderness, first aid, CPR. When I taught in the high schools, to tell you how long it's been, it was before SOLs, the standards of learning, came. And then when that kind of came along, I kind of bowed out. But while I was teaching biology, particularly, I was using forensic science to kind of teach the topics and things like that. And that's how I kind of fell into forensic science. So for a couple of years, I worked with the Division of Forensic Science in, obviously in Virginia. I worked for Texas Department of Public Safety as a forensic scientist. But even there, I was still teaching. And it was actually in Texas where I got my, you might say, first exposure to EMS. When I moved out there, I didn't know anybody. The gentleman whose position I was taking over introduced me to the people at the fire department. So, I just joined and became a volunteer firefighter and worked alongside with a lot of EMS. But as I was working in forensic science, I realized it was nothing like Patricia Cornwell novels or like CSI or like Criminal Minds or The Bone Collector. And there I really didn't feel like I was making the greatest impact in people's lives that I could. So we moved back to Virginia. And well, since I had kind of a passion for fire and EMS, I joined the Gloucester Volunteer Fire Department. And that's where I actually attended and got my exposure, or actually more of a, I guess, my dunking into EMS. They were offering an EMT class, and so I took it. And then I volunteered as a EMT there. And then this volunteerism became a career for me. It began in medical transport. Then I became a paramedic in the Northern Neck. I still serve Gloucester as a paramedic as well as their training officer. And I feel like here I'm actually, making a difference in people's lives, in providers' lives, and I love it. I love it so much. And there's so much out there to EMS now. It's more than just throw the person in the back of the ambulance. Of course, back in the day, it was in the back of the hearse, and then they would either take them to the morgue or to the closest hospital. Like I said, I've worked medical transport as a paramedic. You can work in a hospital. There's so many different opportunities for EMS, and it's no longer just kind of picking up people and transporting them. We have things like community paramedicine, where you actually get more involved and don't just have a quick exposure to picking them up or helping them out. It's more of a development of a relationship with the patients. So I'm really making a difference. I'm also involved with the Regional EMS Council in Virginia, which is kind of cool. There's so many different opportunities there, working with protocols and really looking at evidence-based medicine. Again, it's not, and EMS has come so far. It's no longer, well, we've always done it this way, so let's keep doing it. is really looking at, what are we doing? Does it make a difference? Does it help the patient? Does it make it worse? So it's a very exciting time in EMS. So as I mentioned, I am the program head. I teach paramedic, EMT, advanced EMT, and I really enjoy it. I still stay current by being in the field. And I feel like I'm making a difference. For me, it was a really crooked path to get into EMS, as I mentioned. You don't have to take that path I took. Two of my children are actually in EMS. Both work for 911 systems. My daughter got her EMT at the age of 16, my son at the age of 18. And one works for just a solely EMS, one works for a fire and rescue agency. And now they're both seeking their paramedic. So there's a lot of opportunity. This field is growing. This position is in such high demand. There's such a need for EMS, especially because our field is really grown. Like I said, there's so many different opportunities to do or to use these skills in ways that we would have never imagined or thought possible back in the day. My daughter used to work at CHKD in the ED as an EMT. So, if you don't want to ride in the ambulance, want to work in the emergency department, fantastic, that's great. A lot of doctors' offices now hire EMTs to help with patient assessments. So there's so many different opportunities out there. And so what do we do? And how do we help? We really are there when someone calls to make a difference. And that's what's so interesting about EMS, because people call when they are in their worst and most vulnerable times. We're there, whether it's an illness, an injury, a sick child, or even the death of a loved one. It's really critical points, and we really can make a difference. And we're there. The stranger calls us, and we come. And we get called at all sorts of hours of the night, middle of the night, and we answer the call. All sorts of locations. Their house, the side of the road, even in the wilderness. So there's so many different dynamics to this job. I think it continues to make it very exciting. And there's, picture that helicopter, there's flight paramedics. So there's so much out there. When people call, different ways that we can meet them, meet their needs, reach out to them. And it's up to us to be ready and to be confident in what we do. So why do they call, and what kind of hats do we work or wear as an EMS provider? Starting in the upper left there, we provide healthcare, whether it's because of a chronic or long-time illness, or maybe it's an acute illness, someone's having chest pains or difficulty breathing. But I put student there also because, you're always learning. Like I said, I went from an EMT, they have advanced EMT, there used to be an intermediate, and now you go to paramedic. There's always stuff to learn. The things that we can do as far as EMS goes in the pre-hospital setting continues to grow. It's amazing the tools we have, the medications we can administer. So we're always learning. So, our role as an EMS provider is to take care of them medically, might be taking care of an injury, but it's also to continue to learn. The middle top picture there is counselor. You might be helping someone through anxiety or fear or loss. You never know why someone's going to call, or what the true nature or underlying cause of their difficulty breathing. It might not be an injury, it might not be an illness, it might be a panic attack. So we're counseling them through that. The top right picture there of a teacher, because we are an educator. You'd be surprised at what people don't know about what their medications do or their medical conditions. So we kind of help them through, figure that out sometimes. Why do I take this medication? Well, it's to help your blood pressure or to help with your respiratory illness. And how many medications do these people take, and when do they take them? So sometimes we're just there kind of educating them, helping them kind of figure out, what they have, what they're doing, what will make it better, what might make it worse. Why was this, brought on? What can we do to avoid it? So, your job or the hat is also of an educator. Down there in the lower left, I think one of the most exciting is kind of like a detective, because it's easy when there's a traumatic injury, right? You figure, oh, look, they're injured, we stop the bleeding. But when they have a medical injury, or a medical condition, that's a little more challenging. The person is having difficulty breathing. Is that an asthma attack? Is that anxiety? Is that a heart attack? So we've got to be the detective to kind of figure out what is going on. What is the root cause? I had a friend recently who had indigestion for 3 days that was not relieved by, the Tums. He ended up having a heart attack, and it took a while for him to realize, hey, there's something serious about this. And of course, he called 911. They ran the 12 leader, the ECG, and found out he had been having a heart attack and had to have a bypass. So our role as a detective, is so important to get that history of the patient and figure out what's going on. What were they doing that led up to this? And what are we going to do to help mitigate that? Even if we can't solve it permanently, at least we can delay it until we can get them to definitive care at the hospital, whether it's the heart surgeon or the brain surgeon for a stroke. So I find that's the most exciting and the most interesting. And of course, the most challenging part of EMS is being that detective or that forensic scientist, figuring out what's going on with the patient. What can I do? And are my interventions or what I'm doing for my patient making them better, making them worse, or really not having an impact? And then why or why not? So that's really, really exciting. I think the hardest part there is in the middle is sometimes we're the enemy, and not necessarily intentionally. But like I said, people call us at their most vulnerable time. So they're confused. They might be prideful. They might be fearful. They might be in altered mental status because of a brain injury or some kind of chemical impairment. So we've got to work that through also, being there to help care for them, get them through this illness or injury, and yet protecting ourselves too. And that last one there, the match head above, all the others, is to be the difference. Wherever you decide to go, if you pursue EMS, whether it's in the field, on the road, in an ambulance, it's in a helicopter, it's in the emergency department, it's in a doctor's office, is in home health care through mobile integrated healthcare or community paramedicine, respiratory therapist. Be that difference and stand out. And that's by being prepared, being knowledgeable, being confident, and just continuing on in your training. So that's kind of how I got there. That's kind of what the future holds in EMS. And I open it to questions, whether it's about the paramedic program, whether it's about EMS in general, what you can do, or how to get there, what would be my next steps, what are the requirements to be an EMT? Well, that'd probably be a good one. You have to be at least 16. Let me back that up there. Be at least be 16 and have no felony charges there. And then classes usually last a semester. You can go through like RCC as a community college. Other agencies like Gloucester sometimes offer an EMT class. And once you do that, you take a national registry and you are actually state and nationally registered. So that's kind of cool. So, whether you want to stay in Virginia or go somewhere else, you actually can take that certification elsewhere. So that's pretty cool. Paramedic is a little bit longer. It's between 18 and 24 months once you get your EMT. There's kind of a middle one, which they call advanced EMT, where you can do administer some medications, start IVs, give fluids, that kind of thing. So it's pretty cool. It's a lot of opportunity out there, and again, the need is huge.
There's a question in the chat box. Can you describe a time when you handled a very difficult situation?
Yeah, sure, certainly. Probably the most difficult situations are with, they're either mass casualties, so there's a large incident that requires a lot of resources and a lot of coordination. But I think the most difficult time is actually with an ill child and handling the parents as well as the child, because or the caregiver, because they some are very helpful and some are very stressed out, which is understandable. So with the very ill child and the stressed out parent, what I had to have them do is have my partner that I was working with actually kind of tend to the parent, and then I took care of the child. In mass casualties, it's a little different. You've really got to kind of, I'll say, fake it till you make it kind of deal. And how I prepare for those kind of things is just kind of think through. So if something happened here, such as a bus accident in front of me, how would I handle that? If we had several people get ill, how would I handle that? In mass casualty, what I usually do is, before I even transmit, because we have to do a scene size up, so we look to see what's going on, what happened. I usually take a deep breath and think through what I'm going to say. So part of the preparation in handling a difficult situation is pre-planning, kind of practicing in your head or doing drills. We do a lot of training. And so you're not going to be able to train for every specific situation that might come up, but if you train for some that might be similar, you can at least fall back on those things. So like one of those would be the mass casualties, where you have to take control, become incident command is what we call that, and then start delegating. So those are probably the two most difficult ones, would be the sick child, having my partner take care of the parent while I took care of the child, and mass casualties, larger incidents, pre-planning, kind of thinking it through, taking a deep breath sometimes, even if you're not quite sure what's going on. Take the time to kind of think through it and then take action. Especially in those mass casualties, that really, how it's handled initially really sets it off for how it's going to succeed. Because we've had some times where it has not been handled well and it goes south pretty quickly. Other times, or goes poorly very quickly. Other times they are handled very well and they are settled pretty quickly with amazing efficiency, you might say, or effectiveness.
So the next question is, how would one who is already on an LPN track venture into the EMS career field?
So yeah, absolutely. There is some overlap as far as classes go. I think at least the bio, anatomy, and physiology. There are certain people that can challenge the EMT class. A certified LPN is one, physician assistant is another, and I think physicians in general also. So there's a way of actually not having to go through the entire class, but all they'd have to do is, once they become certified, register to challenge the national registry exam, and that will make you a certified EMT. I think you have to do this 40 hours because it's a little different, EMS versus LPN and physicians. We have standing orders, so we don't get permission from a doctor first. We have to act and then go. So there is some training, I think about 40 hours before you can challenge the test, but that's something that is easily handled, that, something that I could help with once they get their LPN.
Okay, so you would be a good contact for that, because that was going to be my kind of add-on question to that, is who would they contact if they're in that position?
Yeah, absolutely. If they're volunteering with a fire department, they should have an education coordinator or a training officer. That'd be one, or I could handle that.
Okay. And also, do you have shadowing or in-person tours? And and what is, okay, let's start with the first question. Do you have shadowing or in-person tours?
Absolutely. I can arrange for anybody that wants to do a ride along with Gloucester, for example. If there's other departments that they're interested in looking at, I can usually arrange for a ride along for that. That's what we call it. So a shadow, I guess, is the same idea, but it'd be a ride along. So you could just email me and say, hey, I'd be interested in, doing a shift or a ride along or shadowing with this agency. So I can usually set them up as long as they don't already have a student on there.
Okay, and do you have connections all the way up to Fredericksburg? Because some people on the call might be from the Fredericksburg, Stafford area.
Yes. Yeah, I actually grew up in Fredericksburg. So yeah, so I got some connection up there.
Okay, and then I think this question is, what would a shift, an EMT shift look like?
Right. So I'm assuming they're talking about 911, and that's going to vary. Some are 24-hour shifts and some are just 12-hour shifts. Sometimes they can get up to 48, but that gets a little much. And that's what's kind of exciting about EMS in general. You never know what the day is going to hold. There are some days where you don't get but one call. There's days where you are just hammered back to back. Everything from just helping somebody off the floor to working in a cardiac arrest. And depends also on the agency. Like some agencies, especially in the Northern Neck area, are just EMS. Your department's probably around the Fredericksburg area and down south of me. So like Newport News, Hampton, James City County, they are both fire and rescue. So it kind of depends on what you're interested in doing. If your end goal is to be in a career fire department, I would highly recommend getting at least your EMT, if not your paramedic first. Because that's a question I get a lot. Do I go to a fire academy or do I go get my paramedic? Go get your paramedic. Because they are going to put you through fire academy if you're hired. No matter what you have, where you went, they will put you through fire academy. So they look more favorably to having your EMS credentials or certification, because it's a lot more difficult than fire academy. I mean, it is. It's a lot more work. An agency, they're finding that they have people, make it through fire academy and then fail out through EMT. So if you can focus on your EMT now, get that, and then apply for a fire department, that would be the way to go.
And would having that paramedic, going in, whether the fire academy or EMS, obviously probably significantly impacts the compensation.
Absolutely. Yes, they did a nice stipend for having your paramedic annually.
Other questions? Do you want to talk a little bit about how it works with working with fire? So like, let's say, for instance, in the Northern Neck, your EMS and your fire departments are separate. So how does that work when you are, let's say, a mass casualty and you're there and this is all happening? Who takes the lead? Is it fire? Is it EMS? Do you have different duties?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So with mass casualties, the first person on scene becomes the incident command. So they're the ones that take control first. And it's usually going to be EMS in the Northern Neck because they are the ones that are career. From there, whoever might assume command or take over command would be dependent on the nature of the incident. So if it's a fire, most likely one of the fire chiefs are going to take over, or firefighters are going to take over command. The cool thing about incident command, you might say, is it's scalable. So you could have someone that's in charge, the incident command, but then you also have branches. You might have a medical branch who's taking care of all the patients, and then you might have a fire suppression branch who's dealing with the firefighting. So it depends on the scale of the incident, how much you need. Like in Gloucester, if we have even a small car accidents, the first person on scene already establishes command. And that way, as I mentioned earlier, we're practicing for those big incidents. depending on where we are, the Gloucester is actually one department, even though we have fire and EMS, it's still all one department. Usually one of the captains or lieutenants that come on scene will assume command. Ideally in incident command, whoever's in charge, and if they're doing a good job, they're left in charge. Just rank itself doesn't mean you have to be in charge. As far as integration goes, you'll find it work better in some areas than others. And it just has to do with probably personalities and integration between career and volunteers. But as a whole, it works pretty well. And like I said, the person on scene becomes the incident command and takes charge, and then they either keep it or transfer it to somebody else.
Are you aware of any scholarships out there if students are interested in pursuing this career path?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Office of EMS offers scholarships for EMT, the advanced EMT, and for the paramedic. And these are also called Fast Forward, G3, or all those. So there's a lot of funding out there. And we do a lot of it at Rappahannock Community College. Out of a class of 14 this past semester, I had one person pay out of pocket. Everybody else was covered either by a department or through scholarships and funding, because the need is there, and it's very, very important for communities to have. So yeah, there's a lot of funding out there right now.
That's fantastic. And I guess one other question that I don't know if you might have covered this, like if you're in school for this, I know RCC has this, but maybe other schools have this too, but you have your own ambulance. So you kind of have on the job training while you're in school. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We, now that COVID's kind of gone away, we also use live for patients. We used to have to do everything simulated, so we actually bring in real people to practice on that kind of stuff. We do a lot of moulage. We do have an ambulance that we can work out of, but that's what's cool about EMS. If you're hands-on, that's the kind of stuff to do, because there's book work, because you got to understand what you're doing and why this patient's sick, but you've got to do the hands-on. So it's very active, very engaging curriculum, you might say.
Mr. Craig, what kind of de-stressing activities do these frontline personnel have? And is that something that's talked about on a frequent basis?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Mental health, you might call it, is become very frontline, especially in EMS, because we handle a lot, dealing with a sick child or, other people's grief. It does pile up. We have a lot of different resources. The Office of EMS started a program called Make the Call. So, you can call that line and talk to they're actually EMS or firefighters or police officers, so they actually have that experience. There's Code Green, which is also another hotline, which does counseling, that kind of thing, and support. We also have what we call CISM, which is Critical Incident Stress Management. So, for example, my squad, we had dealt with probably 3 or 4 very traumatic, stressful situations, like for 4 shifts in a row. So I called this group in, and they kind of helped debrief the squad, kind of talk through things. You can also do it right after an incident. They call it a hot washing. So if you had a major incident, several people injured, all kids or whatever else, that's stressful for people. They will bring in counselors, advisors, and debrief. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there. And I think people are just becoming more aware as a whole, and looking at and watching each other. When you start to see, hey, I don't, something's not right. Are you okay? agencies also have employee assistance programs. So even the departments themselves have support for that kind of thing. So the advice would be, if you are struggling, to reach out, no matter, whether you're in EMS or not, to reach out and get that help and get that advice, and to be honest with your employer.
Okay, thank you. About how many calls come into a station on I guess it depends on where your station is located. But what seems to be typical?
Yeah, I mean, it really does depend on the day. I think the phase of the moon brings out things. The full moon seems to be worse. Well, even it varies. Like Gloucester, you could go 12 hours without having a call. Right now, I think are on their 5th call in like 3 hours. And it's tight. So, and that's hard because they have like 2 crews on, versus James City County or York County. They're going to have a higher volume of calls, but they also have a lot more staff working. So it varies. I would say as an average, your providers are probably going to see about 4 calls, 5 calls in a shift.
Kayla, I see you have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, hopefully this is not too personal for you, Mr. Craig. I just wanted to know, back to what we were talking about, mental health. You personally, how do you go through a day where, so much tragedy has happened? How do you reset yourself for your next shift? Like, how do you okay, this happened today, and then, I have to move past this to get ready for my next shift, which could possibly either be worse or it could be better. How do you reset yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's hard because you never know. And I think that's just kind of, I won't say scary, but that's part of the stress of this job is you don't know what's going to happen when those tones drop. I mean, and that's, I used to fear cardiac arrest. I would stay up all night worried about, getting a call for a cardiac arrest, and not handling it correctly, so to help mitigate that part, I just did a lot of training, and then I also got into education because I feel like the more I teach others, the more I understand and handle things or are prepared to handle things and know I can handle things. But when things get bad and things get tough, I lean on family. I've got friends in the department that, I can talk to that have either gone through a similar thing or, have gone through the shift with me. So I think for me, just talking about it helps me deal with things. I also find stuff, I'm a big Star Wars fan. So for me, I've remodeled a 1977 travel trailer into a Star Wars theme. So I find things that I enjoy as kind of an outlet, as a creative outlet, because I've always loved art and that kind of stuff. And this is kind of a moving piece of artwork, you might say. So I think for me, it's training, it's being able to talk, and it's also being able to find things that are kind of a creative outlet or something that I enjoy.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And Seth, what is the demand for right now, let's say for paramedics? I feel like there's a workforce shortage across the board. And what does that look like? If someone, graduated tomorrow, is there, endless job opportunities available right now?
I would definitely say yes. I mean, I've had people hired out of my EMT class before they even finish. That's how desperate they really are for firefighters and EMTs. Once you get your EMT, I think you're pretty marketable. Once you get your paramedic, you're definitely marketable. I know at least around here, there's been a lot of just retirement, so that's opened up a lot of gaps. They're not finding the volume of applications that they used to have. So that's, and like I said, they're having a higher turnover. Plus, you're just increasing the amount of work that they do. So they have to increase the staffing. When EMS first started, again, it was just kind of, pick up the patient and carry him to the hospital now. And then it kind of transformed into taking care of people on scene, stabilizing them and then getting them to the hospital. And now we're going into preventive medicine where we do mobile integrated healthcare or community paramedicine, we're actually going in and kind of assisting home health and really being the stopgap between home health and discharge, and working on recidivism, because every time someone falls down, they don't need to call 911 to get them picked up if we can help fix that. So that's just in the 911 realm. Like I said, hospitals are hiring because of the nursing shortage. They're hiring EMTs and paramedics to work in the emergency departments, everything from CHKD to the larger, just the standard hospitals. Doctors' offices are hiring them to help with assessing patients. So the need is out there. I figure if you get your EMT, depending on what you want to do, it doesn't have to, and that's what's amazing. It doesn't have to be 911. If you don't want to work overnight or be woken up in the middle of the night, work at a doctor's office, or if you don't want that fear of being the one totally responsible as the attendant in charge on a call, work in the ED, and you still get to see all the medical and all the trauma stuff, but don't have to be the responsible one for making decisions on patient care. So yeah, the need is out there. You get your EMS, you'll be hired.
All right. Are there any more questions? Mr. Craig, this has been amazing information, that it's not just at a station for EMS, it is, they are utilized elsewhere. So that's really neat to see that opportunity available. And then that there's an opportunity to move with that too. And of course, they're needed all over the place. So thank you for that, and for your team and all of those that are on that front line. You guys really do see that first step before it's cleaned up. You see the raw, and I think about the mental health of you guys out there doing that. So make sure you take care for that. Are there any other questions?
As they come up, that's my email address. So feel free to call or email, regarding EMS as a whole, or the program, or whatever else.
All right, thank you so much for that. So I hope if you're interested, you definitely reach out. We are going to be getting ready to close. Our next session will start at 11. Okay, so we do want to make sure that we, if you haven't evaluated yet, that you have the evaluation link and you take care of that at some point today. Again, Mr. Craig, thank you so much for your time. And we hope we get to hear from you again in the future.
Absolutely. Hope to see you on class.
All right. And for all of you, I am having technical difficulties getting this link in there for the evaluation. So let me try that again. Mary did it for me. Thank you, Mary. She saves the day. All right, everybody. We are going to see you at 11 for our speech therapy and occupational therapy presentation. And you can, of course, check out your booklet for that link as well. And we will see everyone there.